Elizabeth accepted the invitation and arrived at Chelsea in early 1548. In January that year, Katherine Parr attended her brother's wedding to Elizabeth Brooke, the daughter of Lord Cobham. In March 1548, Katherine Parr discovered she was pregnant. She did not notice her husband's frequent absences during her daily prayers or Elizabeth's excuses to be away. As Katherine focused on her pregnancy, Thomas Seymour began to pursue Elizabeth with increasing boldness. He openly flirted with her and engaged in inappropriate behaviour, such as entering her bedroom in a nightgown and tickling her. In the early stages, Katherine saw no wrong in it. Her husband had told her about it, knowing full well that she still regarded her stepdaughter as a child. So she believed Thomas's reassurances that it was harmless. During their stay at Hamworth, Thomas and Elizabeth's interactions became even more inappropriate. Thomas chased Elizabeth through the gardens, wrestled with her, and even cut her gown into strips, while Katherine laughed and held her still. Elizabeth's infatuation was evident, but she lacked the sophistication to hide it. To deflect suspicion from himself, Thomas told Katherine he had seen Elizabeth with another man, which led Katherine to question Elizabeth. Elizabeth burst into tears and denied the accusation, pleading with her stepmother to verify with her women. Katherine's suspicions were aroused, and she realised her husband might be lying to protect himself. Although she lacked concrete evidence of an affair, she was convinced of Thomas's intentions toward Elizabeth and felt compelled to protect the girl. That day, Katherine confided in Sir Thomas Parry, who managed Elizabeth's finances, about her concerns regarding Thomas's affection for Elizabeth. Parry promised to be vigilant. In the April, Katherine caught Thomas and Elizabeth in an embrace. They parted as soon as Katherine saw them, but it was too late. The betrayal was done. In May 1548, Elizabeth left Chelsea for her manor at Cheston. The Admiral did not attempt to visit her, which she appreciated as it simplified matters. Before her departure, she had a final uncomfortable meeting with Katherine, who was distant and did not address the underlying reasons for Elizabeth's departure. Her parting words to Elizabeth were, "God has given you great qualities. Cultivate them always, and labour to improve them, for I believe you are destined by heaven to be Queen of England." And then Elizabeth was gone. After Elizabeth left, Katherine focused on putting the past behind her and repairing her strained marriage. Her determination paid off, and her relationship with her husband improved, and both of them were excited for the birth of their first child. In early June 1548, as the Admiral had to attend to duties at court, Katherine retreated to Hanworth for a few days. While there, she felt her baby move for the first time, a joyful experience that helped to soothe her memories of the unhappy events of spring. With her spirits lifted, she wrote to her husband with renewed affection. "Sweetheart and loving husband, I gave your little knave your blessing, who, like an honest man, stirred apace after and before. For Mary Odell, being abed with me, laid her hand on my belly to feel it stir. It has stirred these 3 days, every morning and evening, so that I trust when you come, it will make you some pastime. And thus I end, bidding my sweetheart and loving husband better to fare than myself." On the 13th of June 1548, they set off for Sudeley Castle. Upon arriving at their new home, Katherine and the Admiral found a letter from John Fowler, which included one from the King. Edward sent his regards to his stepmother and the Admiral, and shared the news that the Duchess of Somerset had given birth to a healthy boy, named after the King and her late elder son, who had died young. This was encouraging for Katherine, whose own confinement was approaching. Elizabeth wrote a letter to Katherine expressing her sorrow at having to leave, signing it, "Your Highness's humble daughter, Elizabeth." This was clearly a plea for forgiveness, and Katherine understood that Elizabeth had never meant to cause her real harm. Having been infatuated with someone who should have known better. Katherine responded warmly, reaffirming her friendship with her stepdaughter. There was no possibility of Elizabeth returning to Katherine's household. However, the Queen was far from lonely during the final weeks of her pregnancy. Lady Jane Grey remained with her, almost like a daughter, and many of Katherine's old friends and acquaintances travelled from London to visit. As a result, Sudeley Castle quickly gained a reputation as the second court in the realm, bustling with nobility and enjoying lavish hospitality provided by the Admiral, who spared no expense in maintaining his wife's royal estate. In August 1548, Katherine Parr was approaching her due date. She spent much of her time with Lady Jane Grey, whom she was fond of. Recently, Katherine had reconciled with Lady Mary, whose earlier disapproval of Katherine's remarriage had softened upon learning that her stepmother was expecting a child. The two women resumed their correspondence, and Mary informed Katherine in a letter that she was planning to go to Norfolk. On the 30th of August 1548, Katherine gave birth to a daughter named Mary in honour of her stepdaughter, the Lady Mary, at Sudeley Castle. The delivery was difficult, leaving Katherine very weak afterwards, though her physicians and midwife, Mary Odell, remained hopeful for her recovery. The Admiral was initially disappointed that the baby was a girl, but soon became devoted to her and promptly sent the news of her birth to the Lord Protector, his brother. The Duchess of Somerset took pleasure in the fact that Katherine had a daughter, especially since she herself had presented her husband with a son, thus seeming to triumph where Katherine had not. However, shortly after the birth, Katherine fell ill with puerperal fever, a common and dangerous complication of childbirth in the Tudor period. She remained delirious for nearly a week, and it became increasingly clear that she would not recover. In her delirium, she expressed her anguish over her husband's betrayal, which troubled her deeply and was now openly evident due to her weakened state. It's the 5th of September and Katherine's condition hasn't improved. She's in bed half lucid. Physically, she's at Sudeley Castle, but mentally, she is replaying the moment she caught Elizabeth and Thomas in an embrace at Chelsea, over and over again in her mind. Thomas is by her side, and when she grabs his hand and says, "My Lady Tyrwhitt, I am not well handled, for those that are about me care not for me, but stand laughing at my grief, and the more good I will to them, the less good they will to me."
This is awkward.
Stunned silence fills the room. Thomas then tries to reassure Katherine that, "I would you no hurt." She may be delirious, but Katherine wasn't going to be pushed around. It's like she's finally able to say everything she had kept inside. "No, my lord, I think so." She then continues, "But, my lord, you have given men many shrewd taunts." Thomas spoke to Lady Tyrwhitt and asked her if she thought he should lay next to his wife and put his arms around her to soothe her with words of love without her ladies present. She agreed that this might help. However, Thomas had not said more than 3 or 4 words when Katherine burst out, "My lord, I would have given 1,000 marks to have had my full talk with Hewick the first day I was delivered, but I durst not for displeasing you." The Queen's outburst against the Admiral lasted for over an hour and was overheard by the ladies attending her bedside, though they left no detailed accounts of it for posterity. Later that day, Katherine's fever subsided and she had no memory of what she had said. Realising she was very weak and with her usual common sense, she understood that she was dying. She decided it was best to make her will while she was still clear-headed. Katherine Parr died at Sudeley Castle on the 7th of September 1548, between 2 and 3 a.m. Her husband, the Admiral, was deeply grieved and arranged for her burial in the castle chapel. Her body was embalmed and placed in a lead coffin in her privy chamber until the funeral was organised. Lady Jane Grey, who had been close to Catherine, mourned her loss deeply, knowing she would now have to return to her parents. Katherine Parr was laid to rest on the 8th of September. Lady Jane Grey acted as the chief mourner, while Dr. Miles Coverdale, Catherine's confessor, delivered the sermon. After the service, Catherine's coffin was lowered into a vault beneath the altar. Lady Jane Grey later wrote to the Admiral expressing gratitude for the guidance she received from Catherine. Both Mary and Elizabeth also grieved for their stepmother, who had been kind and protective. Catherine's death marked a turning point, leading to a growing rift between the sisters, Mary and Elizabeth, who would eventually become rivals in the political and religious conflicts of their time. With Catherine's passing, Anne of Cleves became the only surviving wife of Henry VIII, living a peaceful and respectful life in England. And on that note, that's where I'm going to leave today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, then please make sure you like and subscribe, and make sure you turn that notification bell on so you never miss a video. But until the next one, have a wonderful day.